Welcome to the Legal CFO.
Hello and welcome to the show where clarity meets profitability. This is the Legal CFO with Ryan Kimler, the founder of Net Profit CFO. If you're a law firm owner looking to get a handle on your finances, grow your bottom line, and finally take control of your numbers, you are in the right place because each episode, Ryan's going to break down the business side of law with a straightforward approach and give you strategies to help your firm run smarter, earn more, and scale with confidence. My name's Kevin Rosenquist, and of course, I am joined by Ryan Kimler. Ryan, welcome back.
Yes, it is great to be here. Thank you. And excited for today's topic.
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate you coming back and bestowing your wisdom upon all of the lawyers listening to our show. Today, we're going to talk about leaving money on the table and how law firms can stop doing that. So let's start with an obvious question. Why do so many law firms underprice their services?
Yeah, that is a great question. I think when you start your firm, you want just enough work to be busy, right? And you know, you kind of set your prices and then over time, and I think, you know, oddly, accountants kind of have this, they fall into the same trap. You know, because myself, I've experienced it. Like over time, you underestimate your expertise, you underestimate your experience, and you don't raise prices quick enough to really match the market and be competitive for what you're really offering. And so it's almost like a confidence thing. I think it's a mindset thing too. Sometimes, right? I mean, and I think you just kind of fall behind a little bit. And then, you know, I come into the firm and I'm like, whoa, I know what other firms are charging that do this, you know, and I know you have 20, years experience, you should be here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we start working towards that number, whatever it is. You know, sometimes it's a number that as a business owner scares you, right? I think you jump to, oh my gosh, 80% of my clients would leave, right? And until you test the waters, you don't really know that, but that's kind of where you jump to.
Yeah, you jump to worst case scenario.
Yep. And there's a little bit of fear in there, right?
Sure.
Because as a business owner, obviously, you know, especially if you've hired employees, you've got the responsibility of their job and you're trying to provide for their family, not only your own family. So a lot of money, I think, does get left on the table, and little price increases, especially if you're doing hourly, really build up over time, right? You know, a $10 increase on an attorney that does 1,500 billable hours a year is, you know, 15,000. So that makes a big difference.
Yeah, it really does. And pricing services is tough. Like I brought up in the last one, you know, it's easier to predict if you have a product than a service, your yearly income. But yeah, because you know that there's always going to be someone out there cheaper, right? But you have to shift your mindset of, do you want the client who's looking for the cheapest price? And that's a hard, especially for newer firms, for any new service-based business, you want to be price competitive. So it's difficult to, it's easy, I should say, to undervalue yourself.
Yep. And I think you start getting into those higher price clients. And, you know, from my experience, somebody that is shopping around and wants something cheap is going to be the biggest pain in the butt also.
Yeah. That's very good point.
Like that's just how it works, right?
It is.
Because on their side, they have the expectation that you're going to do it all for little money. And you get into a completely different clientele when you start raising prices. I mean, even myself, right? Today, like if I've got a serious problem in my life, most likely I greatly appreciate expertise, and I greatly appreciate having someone that's going to do things right. And most likely, in order to save me on time and just to have the peace of mind and trust in that individual, I'm going to pay, you know, a high price, and I'm good with it.
I totally agree with you, especially when it's something like
big,
like a lawyer.
Yep.
It's presumably you need some help if you're hiring a lawyer most of the time.
Absolutely.
What should a firm evaluate before they consider raising their rates?
Great question. So first, I think the first thing to evaluate is profitability. And, on the last show, we talked about ideally your payroll is 40 to 45% of your, revenue. If you're higher than that, you're probably underpriced. I mean, it could be efficiency. You probably need to look there too. But one of the best benchmarks that I use is I look at if you were to hire a brand new associate today, brand new out of law school, what would you pay them? And then you need to multiply that by 5. I expect your law firm gets a 5x return on that associate attorney that's brand new. And that's going to be the highest multiple that you ever get on an attorney, because as their career progresses, you're going to pay them more money. Their billable hours aren't necessarily going to change. Their rates will change some, but usually that doesn't keep up with the multiple. It's hard to get 5 times, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you take someone from 100 to 200K, 100K, being able to bill 500K in a year, if you're priced right, you can do it. Being able to bill $1 million a year on 200K salary, not going to happen. So, you really have this sliding scale. And as attorneys get more progressed, more experience, your return as an owner is going to go down. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but looking at that brand new associate attorney, which should be the greatest return on the scale, is a great place that I love to start. So if you're going to pay them 100, you're expecting that they're billing 500. And that's what actually gets on the bills. That's not before write-offs, that's after write-offs. So then you need to start doing some math and seeing is that even feasible, right? Is my hourly rate even feasible with the number of hours that I expect them to bill? So there's a little bit of math involved, but that's where to start. And, some other advice that I could give in the sales and the closing room, good rule of thumb is 20 to 25% of people should turn you down on price. If 100% accept, you're probably too low.
Okay. That's a good way to look. I like that. Yeah. So 20, where do you get that? Where does that number come from? Just experience?
Just experience, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I really don't know. I mean, just experience. I've just seen that that's the way that it works out in growing firms.
Mm-hmm.
You get that lead flow coming in, and 20 to 25% ideally should turn you down on price. And that helps you manage capacity, manage the number of cases you're handling. And look at it this way. If you're not having 20 to 25% turn you down on price and 100% of people accept, if you're getting a good lead flow in, you could have raised your prices, cut your case numbers that you're handling, and came out with the same number of income dollars.
Right.
And so if you are having 100% of people accept, you're leaving money on the table.
I feel like connecting pricing to actual profitability can be difficult because a lot of people can think about it as in a revenue situation. You're always looking at your revenue numbers, but you really need to think about your pricing when it comes to profitability. How do you recommend firms do that?
Yeah. So again, I think, looking at what your payroll, what is it going to cost to really get this done? So I'll just dive into a specific practice area, and just to make things easy and round easy numbers. Let's say you're an estate planning firm and you're selling estate plans for couples at $5,000. I'm just going to throw out round easy numbers. Really look at, okay, how many hours of my staff's time and my attorney's time is going into getting that estate plan done in a normal case, right? I know it can probably vary depending on how well the client works with you and gets you their stuff. But on a normal case, right, if you're flat rating it, you're kind of acting like an insurance company, right? Because you could charge people by the hour. You're going to have some cases that people work with you really quickly. They get you their stuff. You're only going to get $2,000 out of them, or $3,000, something like that. And then you could have people that take a really long time and you're more like $8,000, right? And so when you start pricing on a flat basis, you're kind of acting like an insurance company.
Mm-hmm.
And you're charging more for some, less for some, right? But really look at, what does it cost me at the firm to get that case done at billable rates, right? So if you've got an attorney that you bill out at $300 an hour and they're going to have 3 hours in it, that's $900, right? Just round easy numbers here, right? And just an example. But I think from a pricing standpoint, when you get that part included, that payroll part is going to be the biggest part. You could then add in a little bit of costs for marketing and some to go towards your overhead, rents, things like that. If you own a building, towards your mortgage payment, what have you. But really looking and making sure there's a good, strong margin just over and above and beyond what your payroll is going to be a great place to start, and break it down just to a single case. If you're billing hourly, and things can really vary, I would encourage you look at the cases that you've closed in the last 3, 4, 5 months and look at what total billings have been on those cases and in that practice area specifically. So if you handle like divorces, for example, obviously those can go to court, could really verify, custody might be involved, right? You could probably separate out divorce cases that are just, a couple versus divorce cases that has custody involved. Get down to an average billing on those cases. And that's also going to help you set your retainer too, which is a whole different topic. But
Right.
start looking at what does it really cost us to get those cases done and what's the average. And that's going to give you a price point where you can sit in a closing room and give a client a realistic expectation. Because one of the last things I'll say, and then we'll move forward, is while I do really appreciate expertise, one thing that I would not appreciate is that if I get told that it's one price and then we get into the process and we find out something else that we didn't forecast or didn't plan for, and all of a sudden the price goes way up. I'm okay with small adjustments, but if we're really, really far off, like if I get told something's $5,000 and all of a sudden it's 12, I'm not going to be happy.
Right.
Right. So I think being prepared for that and working with your client on that really, really helps.
Other than the things we've already kind of talked about, are there other signs that a pricing model isn't working?
I think bottom line profits,
Yeah.
right? I mean, if your law firm is not producing at least 20% profits, and I'm not saying solos can produce way more than that, because if you're just one attorney, you probably don't have an office space, you don't have payroll, right? You don't have marketing costs necessarily. You're probably getting referrals from clients and you're probably out there networking, and you can probably do that really, really low cost. So I would say I'm not talking solos in this topic, because that you could probably net 50% plus on the solo side.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm talking about firms that are really growing. They have a small team. If you're not at least 20% profits, I would say that's probably a good indicator something is not working. In some cases, maybe your overhead is out of control. But what I have found is that in most cases, you're not priced right, and you can't afford the people that you have because you're not priced right. And so when you're under that 20% mark, and that means, if you're looking at your profit and loss, you can take your total profits from last year, divide that by your total sales. That's going to get you down to a percentage. If you're under that 20%, that's a great indicator that you need to start looking at what's really going into producing your results, because something's off.
Are you finding more firms looking at the flat fee approach?
For sure. Yeah. And I would say there's some positives to that. There's some negatives to that, right? Let's start with the positive side. So positive side, if you do it right, I kind of talked about that insurance policy earlier, and you could find where that middle of the road place would be. So maybe you're doing that estate plan and you've had clients that have been the $3,000 client, and then you've had clients that have been the $8,000 client. And you can find that middle of the road place that's a weighted average, obviously, right, across cases that maybe you've done over the last 6 months. And you can actually price yourself above that weighted average, right? So if your weighted average is 5, you can actually price yourself at 6, right? And then you're coming out way, way ahead, because on every case that you're doing, you're coming out above average.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Another advantage I would say as well would be leveraging your staff, and especially like younger associates that normally in an hourly bill model, you would charge less for, right? So your associate on staff might be $300 versus the partners might be $450, $500. I'm just throwing out round numbers here, but billing in a flat rate model, if you can really leverage your associate attorneys that you would normally bill at a lower rate to use their hours to get a lot of the work done, you're going to come out more profitable as well, right? Because if they were actually billing a client directly per hour, it's at a much lower hourly rate.
Right.
Then let's flip to the negative side a little bit. So that's really the positive side. I guess one other thing to wrap up on the positive side, it probably makes billing easier for your clients, right? If they can go get an estate plan and it's going to be $6,000, they can cut the check and be done with it. Probably makes it easier for them, makes sure billing more simple. You take the first half up front and you start work, and then you get the second half when you sign paperwork or whatever. So that probably, helps you there. Couple downsides. I would say some firms that I've ran into, they believe that, well, we've gone flat rate now, we don't need to track hours. That is an awful trap to fall into, because if you can't see productivity and you can't see, who on staff is really getting things done, how do you know who deserves raises? And when you have an employee come to you and they ask you for a raise, how do you know how much it should be if they deserve one, right? You don't have a leg to stand on when you don't track hours. And I understand, like, I used to work at a CPA firm that we tracked and billed hours. Major pain in the butt.
I hate it. I hate tracking hours. I'm terrible at it. I know I've left money on the table throughout my business career, and it's just hard. I hate it.
And I get it. It's a pain. And, you can be probably a little bit more loose with the guidelines if you're doing flat rate, but it doesn't mean you can't track hours at all. Last thing I'll say is and I'm not an expert on this, but the attorneys that I'm talking to here will know what I'm talking about. There's in the bar guidelines, there's a rule that requires that your pricing be reasonable for the services, right? And so having the hours to back that really helps you in that case. I don't know the language exactly. That's real technical. But that would be another downside that I would see if you think you can go flat rate and not track hours. That's a trap for sure. And I would say don't do it. That's the downside that I've seen.
How is it difficult for a firm to shift from hourly to flat rate?
Sometimes, and I think the hardest place to shift is probably in the sales room. It's in the closing room, because the mindset's got to be completely different. You're going from selling an hourly service that most people, when you're talking hourly rates, they view as commodity, which means lower value, less sales pressure, right? Lower expectations. To, if you flip over to a flat rate model, people start viewing it as a value pricing, right? That I'm paying $5,000 for a trust. Well, if I was to have an accident and pass away, like, what value does that have? That my estate doesn't go to probate and that my family doesn't have to deal with that. I would say that's got a value much greater than $5,000, at least to me, right? And so the mindset really has to shift. How you sell it has to shift. And so I would say one of the biggest challenges shifting models is just getting that down to start with, and being able to sit in the closing room and explain that to a client and really have confidence in it, right? And really be able to keep those closing rates at a decent rate so that your firm continues to have new cases.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, the mindset in the sales room, I think, is an interesting point that you bring up, because it does change. The buyer's perception is just different when you think about hourly versus flat rate. Yeah.
Yep. And there's probably a little bit more peace of mind for the buyer too, because they know, okay, if I'm looking at hourly rates, I'm like, where could this go?
Right? Yep, exactly.
Where's my end number going to be? Versus if I'm looking at a flat rate, it's like, all right, $6,000. I'm ready to go. Right.
Well, and I think a lot of people also think like, oh, they're going to try to milk this, aren't they? They're going to try to make this, they're going to somehow figure out a way to charge me more than I should. Yeah.
Yep. For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right. Good stuff as always. Thanks for listening to the Legal CFO with Ryan Kimler. If you're ready to get financial clarity for your law firm, visit netprofitcfo.com. And don't forget to follow us, subscribe to us, and leave us a review. We got lots more great information coming your way. Ryan, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate all the insight.
Absolutely excited to do it. And thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.